concept of human rights is a cornerstone of modern civilization, representing the universal entitlement of every individual of fundamental freedoms and dignity, irrespective of nationality, gender, ethnicity, religious, or any other status. However, these rights are not a sudden invention of a contemporary era. They are the accumulation of a long and intricate historical evolution. The journey of human rights spans millennia, rooted in the philosophical, religious, and legal traditions of ancient civilizations, and has been shaped by pivotal documents that challenged existing power structures and articulated new versions for human dignity and injustice and justice. This report seeks to trace this profound historical arc, exploring how the idea of inherent and inalienable rights gradually emerged and crystallized. By examining key historical milestones from the enlightened policies of Cyrus the Great in ancient Persia, through the groundbreaking constitutional framework of Medina Charter to the revolutionary assertion in Magna Carta, the American Declaration of Independence, and the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, we can discern the continuous, though often contested, human struggle for freedom, equality, and legal protection. Understanding this history is crucial. It provides an indispensable context for our contemporary human rights framework, reminding us that these rights were hard-won through centuries of thought, conflict, and advocacy. This exploration will not only highlight the timeless principle connecting these diverse documents, but also reveal how much era built upon these ideas of the last, contributing to the universal and indispensable concept of human rights we strive to uphold today.
May feel like a modern concept, but in reality, they have evolved over thousands of years. Long before today's international laws, different civilizations were already developing ideas about dignity, justice, and fairness. From the Cyrus cylinder in ancient Prussia to early community agreement like the Medina Charter, we can see that human beings have always searched for ways to protect one another from injustice. Understanding these origins is important because it reminds us that the right we enjoy did not simply appear. They were shaped by centuries of struggle and negotiations and sacrifice. When we look at this long history, we gain a deeper appreciation for how complex our modern human rights system truly is. Studying this history also motivates us. It shows us that progress is never guaranteed. Every generation has to stand up and fight for its freedom. Without constant effort, rights can be weakened and even disappeared. This teaches us that protecting human dignity requires ongoing vigilance. Finally, learning the history of human rights has great value for us today. It helps us clarify where our institutions and legal protection come from. It inspired us by showing how ordinary people challenge injustice, and it reminds us that human rights project is a long global journey, one that continues with us. In short, the origin of human rights reveal a powerful truth. These seeds were not gifts from rulers, but achievement earned over time. Knowing this history equips us to preserve them and push them forward for future generations.
What can we learn from history? The study of human rights history is much more than a simple timeline of events. It's in fact an intellectual laboratory that helps us understand the philosophical foundations, development, and the constant challenges involved in protecting human dignity. By examining major historical documents within their original contexts, we gain insights that continue to shape model human rights thinking and practice. 2. The universality and fragility of human dignity. Across different civilizations and eras, the idea that every person possesses inherent worth has emerged repeatedly. For example, the Sarah cylinder from 539 BC, although rooted in imperial strategy, marked a groundbreaking shift. It promoted the liberation of enslaved peoples and respected local religion and cultural traditions after Persia conquered Babylon. Likewise, the Medina Charter of 622 ADS created a remarkable evidence constitutional system for a pluralistic society. Muslims, Jews, and other communities were granted not only tolerance but equal rights, shared responsibility, and collective discussion, making forming a unit the political continuity built on justice and mutual society. This example teaches us two major lessons. First, the human design for justice and respectful treatment is universal. It is not confined to any one culture or model Western philosophy. Second, and more importantly, history shows that these principles are deeply vulnerable. The reform of Saras were not fully sustained by later rulers, and the pluralistic balance in Medina faced conflict and threats. This recurring partner across its worlds. The history reminds us that human rights do not preserve themselves automatically. They require constant protection, strong legal frameworks, and cultural community from every generation. Human dignity may be universal in principle, but its realization remains fragile and must be continuously defined.
Okay, so let's talk about the limiting power and rule of the law in the history of human rights. Human rights are fragile. To protect them, we must limit power. A major step in history was the Magna Carta in 1250. Before this, kings had an unlimited power, but the Magna Carta was the first written document that forced the English king to obey the law. It introduced the revolutionary idea that no one, not even the king, is above the law. It protected people from arbitrary arrest, stating that no free man could be imprisoned without a lawful judgment. This established the principle of due process, which is a foundation for justice everywhere. Furthermore, it declared that taxes could not be raised without the common consent of the hidden. This was an early form of people having a voice in their government. The media culture created early checks and balances on power. It shows that government power must be limited and based on the rule of law. This ancient idea is still vital today. It's a shelter that protects our basic rights and freedoms from being obsessed by those in authority. The first to limit power is unconditional strive to secure human dignity for all.
Part 4. Revolution and Popular Sovereignty. Rights are not gifts granted by the powerful, but are won through collective struggle. This revolutionary assertion, born in America and France, directly replaced the old concept of divine right with the principle of popular sovereignty, establishing that a government's legitimacy comes from the consent of the governed. This wasn't just a physiological shift, it was a call to action. The act of codifying basic rights into constitutional documents ensured they were protected, but more importantly, the very spirit of the right to resist went global. It became a universal rallying cry, inspiring countless movements for independence and social justice across the world, proving that the power to shape a just social society ultimately lies with the people.
My section focuses on two core ideas. First, the dynamic expansion of human rights, and second, the fact that the human rights project is never truly finished. Historically, human rights did not start as universal. They were extremely narrow, protecting only a small group, mainly free men in early societies. But as human understanding of dignity grew, the boundaries of who deserves these rights began to expand. Over centuries, more groups, different races, women, and people of all social backgrounds were gradually recognized as rights holders. This shows that human rights develop through a long dynamic process. They grow whenever societies challenge inequality and push for inclusion. But this expansion has never reached a final point, and that leads to the second idea. The human rights project is never complete. Even today, new challenges continue to appear. Issues like digital privacy, algorithmic discrimination, environmental rights, and the protection of migrants all remind us that rights must constantly adapt. Each generation has the responsibility to identify new forms of exclusion and expand protection to those who are left behind. The story of human rights is not a finished chapter. It is an ongoing journey, one where rights continue to widen and where our work to define and advise them must continue as well.
An extraordinary ancient artifact, the Cyrus column. This clay document, discovered in Babylon in 5839 BC, is now housed in the British Museum. It is not only a political statement by Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, but is also known as the world's first human rights chapter. Our story in the conquest, the cylindrical text begins with a condemnation of tyranny, depicting the last Babylonian king Nabonidus as an unjust ruler who ignored the god and oppressed the people. Cyrus claimed to be the righteous leader, chosen by the Babylonian god Marduk with the aim of restoring order and justice. The most shocking thing is that the cylinder depicting the entry of Cyrus. He asserted that this was a peaceful conquest. His army entered the city without battle, without conflict, and did not allow anyone to intimidate the people. He was committed to restoring social stability and economic prosperity, declaring himself committed to peace in Babylon and all its cities, reducing excessive taxation, and dedicated himself to the well-being of his subjects. This practice of placing restraints above destruction embodies a humanitarian governance concept that transcends the times and lays the moral foundations for tolerance rule. Religion, freedom, and humanitarian principles, the values of a cylinder lines in its respect for cultural and religious diversity. It not only ordered the restoration of religious sites, but more importantly, Cyrus allowed exiled peoples, such as the Jains brought to Babylon, to return to their homes and rebuild their temples. This recognition of religious freedom and the right to return is an early precedent in ancient imperial governance. His policy is based on inclusivity, respecting the customs and the beliefs of all subjects, which laid the foundation for the diversity of the empire.
In part 7, we will talk about the Medina chapter, one of the earliest documents promoting human rights and pluralism. First, the chapter united diverse groups, Muslim, Jews, and also Arab tribes under a single political community, replacing tribes feuds with a shared society. It allows religion autonomy, letting each group keep their beliefs while cooperating on security and defense, creating a new form of federalism. The chapter is also seen as a constitutional prototype, showing how different groups can coexist under a legal framework, making it model of a multicultural society. It replaced blood feuds with the rule of law, requiring disputes to be settled through arbitration. Finally, it emphasized fair trials and mutual aid, introducing social welfare principles. So basically, the Medina chapter aids to foundation for justice, equality, and cooperation in a plural society.
Hello everyone, I'm going to talk about part 8 and the Magna Carta. So the Magna Carta was signed in 1215, and it was a really turning point in history because for the first time the king had to follow written law. It all started when the king barons pushed back against King John and forced him to accept limits on his power. One important part is Clause 16.1, which basically created an earlier checks and balance system. It allowed a group of barons to challenge the king if he broke the rules. So the document became the prototype of model constitutionals. It showed that even the highest ruler is not above the law. And of course, and this idea later influenced the rise of parliamentary democracy. So another big contribution of Magna Carta is that it introduced the core ideas we still use today. One major idea is due process, meaning the government can't just arrest or punish someone without properly proper legal reason. This becomes the basics for fair trade in model legal systems. Another key idea is no taxation without consent. Basically, the king couldn't just raise taxes whenever he wanted, and he needed approval. This idea strongly shaped how democratic governments developed later on, especially the rule of parliaments. So in short, the Magna Carta limited absolute royal power and introduced ideas like due process and consent. It still influences model democracies today.
And that changed the world. The American Declaration of Independence, born in 1776, its core message is simple yet powerful. All people are created equal, born with unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These rights aren't given by kings or laws. They are part of what makes us human. It also made clear governments get their power from the people. If government operates its people, the people have the right to change it. The idea inspires the whole world. The French Revolution, national independence movement, and fights for justice all bear its mark. True, it wasn't perfect at first. Not everyone was included, but the dream of equality and freedom has guided us to keep expanding rights for all. Remember, rights aren't handed out; they are found for. Freedom and equality need everyone generations protection. This 200-year-old legal will keep leading us towards a fair and better world.
The French Declaration represents a monumental shift from rights for specific subjects to the rights of universal man. It broadly asserted that all men are born and remain free and equal. Critically, it confirmed the principles of popular sovereignty and the separation of powers, establishing that government authority must be derived from the people. Furthermore, it served as a powerful codification of Enlightenment ideas, embedding personal liberty, property, free speech, and freedom of belief into a new framework for modern constitutional democracy. This influence has had a lasting impact on democratic systems worldwide. Ultimately, it was this profound legacy that made the French Declaration the direct ideological sources and blueprint for the universal declaration of human rights, shaping the very foundation of international human rights.
I would like to introduce the historical journey of human rights and the cross-civilization collective struggle. Throughout history, the development of human rights has been like a relay across epochs and eras. Every major document, from ancient legal codes to modern constitutions, challenge the existing power structure and expanding dignity to more people. These milestones also demonstrate that rights originate from the people, not from rules. Human rights will really granted voluntarily by authorities. Instead, they will demanded, defended, and achieved through collective struggle. Together, these ideas build the philosophical and moral basis for modern human rights, eventually influencing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. However, the journey is not finished. The expression of human rights remains a never-ending project, and today we face new challenges such as digital surveillance, discrimination, and global inequality. Therefore, we must continue to pass on ongoing legal and social reform to ensure that a set of principles and revolutionary ideas continue to evolve and protect human dignity in modern society. In short, human rights are not just history, they are an activity missions that requires our continued commitment and participation. Thank you.
This is supported by a review of seminal historical texts. Our sources span from the ancient world with the Cyrus cylinder to the foundational charters of the medieval and early modern periods, including the Medina Charter, Magna Carta, and the American and French declarations of the late 18th century.